Economic Captivity, the Illusion of Freedom Under Capitalism. The Wage Cage, freedom that isn't freedom. You're free. This is what you're told, what you tell yourself. Free to choose your career, free to pursue opportunities, free to build the life you want. You live in a free society with free markets where anyone can succeed through hard work and smart choices. You're free. Except you're not. Not really. Not in any meaningful sense. You're trapped in what appears to be freedom, but is actually an elaborate cage. The bars are invisible because they're economic rather than physical, but they're no less real. You must work to survive, and this necessity removes freedom at its foundation. The wage cage operates through a simple mechanism. You don't own the means of survival. You can't feed yourself from land you own. You can't house yourself in shelter you built. You can't clothe yourself from materials you produced. All of these necessities are owned by others, priced by markets, available only through money. So you must sell something to get money. And the main thing you have to sell, for most people the only thing you have to sell, is your labor, your time, your energy, your body, your mind. You sell these by the hour, by the project, by the year. You sell yourself piecemeal to whoever will buy. This is called employment, and it's framed as freedom. You're free to choose where to work, free to negotiate your wage, free to quit if you don't like it. These freedoms are real in technical sense, but they operate within constraint that's never questioned. You must work for someone or starve. Imagine someone pointing a gun at you and saying, "You're free to choose, give me your wallet or get shot." You technically have choice, but calling this freedom is obscene. The gun removes freedom by creating necessity. You choose the wallet, but the choice is forced. Capitalism works the same way, just slower and less obvious. The gun is economic necessity. The threat isn't immediate death, but eventual homelessness, hunger, medical crisis. You're free to choose among employers, but you're not free to opt out of employment itself. The choice among masters isn't freedom from mastery. Sartre would call this bad faith, lying to yourself about your situation. You tell yourself you're free because acknowledging the cage is unbearable. But the cage is real. You're free within extremely narrow parameters, and the parameters themselves aren't chosen. They're imposed by economic structure you didn't create and can't escape. The person changing jobs thinks they're exercising freedom, and they are in limited sense. They can choose this cage over that cage, this master over that master, this form of labor selling over that form. But they can't choose none of the above. I'll opt out of wage labor entirely. That option doesn't exist for people without capital. The trust fund kid is actually free in ways wage workers aren't. They can choose not to work, can pursue projects that don't make money, can take years to find themselves, can fail without catastrophe. This is what actual freedom looks like, having real options including the option of refusal. But you don't have that. You have freedom to choose among necessities, freedom to pick your exploitation, freedom to select your cage. And you're told to be grateful for these freedoms, told you live in free society, told that unfree societies are different from this. The unfreedom is structural, not personal. It's not that your particular employer is tyrannical, though they might be. It's that employment itself is constrained freedom. You're selling yourself because you must, and must selling isn't free selling no matter how many buyers you can choose among. Different people experience the cage differently. High-paid professionals have gilded cage, more comfortable, more spacious, harder to see as cage. Low-wage workers have obvious cage. The bars are visible, the constraint is felt daily, the desperation is clear. But both are caged. The professional can't stop working without losing house, healthcare, status, identity. The compulsion is real even if comfortable. They're trapped by golden handcuffs, which are still handcuffs. The metal being precious doesn't make them not restraints. The gig economy promised freedom, be your own boss, set your own hours, but it delivered intensified cage. Now you're not just worker, but also your own manager, your own HR, your own enforcer. You've internalized the boss. The cage is inside you. The person driving for rideshare isn't free. They're subject to algorithm they can't see, can't negotiate with, can't refuse. They're more controlled than traditional employee, but with fewer protections. The freedom is pure marketing. The reality is surveillance capitalism with even less security. Existentialism says you're radically free. You can always choose, always say no, always refuse. But this freedom is formal, not substantive. Yes, you can quit your job. And then what? You can choose to be homeless. You can choose to starve. These are technically choices, but they're not what freedom means. The freedom that matters is freedom to live, to pursue projects, to exist without constant economic anxiety. And this freedom is denied by structure that requires selling yourself to survive. You're free the way a slave who can choose which master to serve is free, technically but not actually. The cage is permanent for most people. You'll work until you're old if you're lucky enough to reach old age. You'll sell yourself for decades. You'll never escape the necessity of wage labor unless you're among the small percentage who accumulate enough capital to live from investments rather than work. And investments are just owning the cage that others are trapped in, extracting value from others' labor, becoming the buyer rather than the seller in the human marketplace. This is what financial freedom means under capitalism. Freedom from selling yourself by profiting from others selling themselves. The recognition of the cage is bleak. You're not as free as you thought. The choices you make are constrained by necessity you can't refuse. The freedom is mostly illusion, and the illusion serves to make the cage bearable by pretending it's not a cage. But there's something clarifying about seeing clearly. You stop blaming yourself for feeling trapped. You are trapped. You stop thinking you just need to find the right job. All jobs are selling yourself. You stop believing that success will free you. Success just gilds the cage. The comfort is minimal but real. You're not crazy. The sense that you're not truly free despite living in free society is accurate. The economic anxiety isn't personal failing, but rational response to actual precarity. The exhaustion isn't weakness, but appropriate reaction to being forced to sell yourself constantly. Tonight, you rest from the wage cage. For these hours, you're not selling yourself, not performing productivity, not optimizing your human capital. The biological necessity of sleep is one constraint that capitalism hasn't fully colonized. Yet, sleep is small freedom from economic compulsion. Tomorrow the cage remains, the necessity returns, the selling resumes, but tonight you can see the cage clearly without pretending it's freedom, and somehow the honest bleakness is more restful than the lie of freedom. You're trapped, and admitting it is relief from pretending you're not. The commodification of being when you become product. Under capitalism, everything becomes commodity. Objects to be bought and sold, resources to be exploited, products to be marketed. This includes you. You're not just selling your labor, you're packaging yourself as product, marketing yourself as brand, commodifying your very being for exchange value. The job application is you as product presentation. The resume is marketing brochure. The cover letter is sales pitch. The interview is product demonstration. You're selling yourself, literally, and you must make yourself appealing to buyers in labor market. This requires treating yourself as object, not subject with inherent worth, but product with market value. You assess yourself not by your humanity, but by your employability. Your worth is determined by what someone will pay for you, not by fact that you exist. The person preparing for interview must think, what features do I have that buyers want? How do I differentiate myself from competing products? What value proposition do I offer? This is commodified consciousness, viewing yourself as thing to be sold rather than person to be respected. The commodification goes deeper than labor. You must commodify your personality, be friendly but not too friendly, confident but not arrogant, enthusiastic but not desperate. Your affect is product feature that must be optimized for market appeal. You must commodify your appearance. Dress for the job you want, they say. Your body becomes marketing material. Professional appearance, appropriate grooming, acceptable presentation. You're packaging yourself for sale, and the packaging must appeal to buyers' preferences. You must commodify your time. Every hour must be productive, monetizable, optimized. Time that doesn't produce value is wasted time. Hobbies must have purpose. Relationships must be networking. Rest must be optimization of future productivity. Even your leisure is commodified as self-care that maintains your market value. Social media intensifies commodification. You're not just living life, you're producing content. Your experiences are photo opportunities. Your thoughts are posts. Your relationships are engagement metrics. You've become media product, creating value for platforms that sell you to advertisers. The influencer is purest expression of self-commodification. They are the product. Their life is content. Their personality is brand. Their authenticity is marketing strategy. They've fully embraced being commodity, and this is presented as success, as aspiration, as freedom. But everyone under capitalism is influencer to some degree. Everyone must manage their brand, curate their image, optimize their market value. The professional network profile, the polished resume, the carefully crafted email signature, all of it is self-commodification, treating yourself as product to be marketed. The commodification of being is alienation in Marxist sense. You're separated from yourself because you must view yourself as other, as object, as commodity, as exchange value rather than use value. Your humanity becomes obstacle to overcome, mess to be cleaned up, inefficiency to be optimized away. The person who tries to bring their whole self to work discovers their whole self isn't marketable. Aspects of personality must be suppressed. Needs must be ignored. Humanity must be performed in professional, appropriate ways. You can bring yourself to work only after commodifying yourself into acceptable form. The commodification creates what Sartre would call being for others. You exist primarily as object in others' perception. Your being for yourself, your subjective experience, your inner life, becomes less important than your being for market. What matters is how buyers perceive you, not who you actually are. Different industries commodify differently. Tech industry commodifies enthusiasm, youth, willingness to work absurd hours. Finance commodifies aggression, confidence, ruthlessness. Service industry commodifies smile, deference, emotional availability. But all commodify, all require packaging human being as market-appropriate product. The commodification extends to relationships. Networking isn't friendship. It's strategic relationship management for career advancement. Mentorship isn't generosity. It's investment in future connections. Collaboration isn't cooperation. It's mutual value extraction. Everything becomes transaction. The person trying to maintain authentic friendship with colleague faces tension. Is this friendship or networking? Am I valued for myself or for my professional utility? The commodification corrupts the relationship, makes genuine connection suspect, turns human warmth into potential manipulation. Even intimate relationships get commodified. Dating apps package people as products, swipe through inventory, assess market value, optimize matching algorithm. You're selling yourself in romance market, and you must compete with other products for buyers' attention. The dating profile is self-commodification. You're highlighting attractive features, minimizing flaws, positioning yourself against competition. You're product-seeking buyer, and you must make yourself appealing through accurate but flattering marketing. The commodification is exhausting because you can never stop performing. The product must always be market-ready. You can't have off days, can't be genuinely unwell, can't stop optimizing. The moment you stop maintaining the commodity, your market value declines. The person burning out isn't just tired from working, they're exhausted from being product, from constantly assessing market value, from perpetually managing brand, from never being allowed to just be without considering how being affects market position. The commodification means your needs become irrelevant unless they affect productivity. You need rest? Only relevant if fatigue reduces market value. You need connection? Only relevant if isolation affects performance. You need meaning? Irrelevant unless it improves outputs. Your humanity matters only instrumentally. Different people resist commodification differently. Some refuse to network, to optimize, to perform. But refusal carries cost, lower income, fewer opportunities, social marginalization. The system punishes those who won't commodify themselves. Some embrace commodification cynically. Fine, I'm product. I'll optimize myself ruthlessly, extract maximum value, treat it as game. But this creates its own alienation. You've internalized the reduction of human to commodity, accepted the premise that being is having market value. The recognition of commodification is clarifying. You're not imagining it. You really are expected to treat yourself as product. The exhaustion from self-marketing is rational response to irrational demand. The sense that something fundamental is wrong when you package yourself for sale is moral clarity, not personal failing. Can you live under commodification without being destroyed by it? Can you sell yourself while knowing that's what you're doing? Can you maintain awareness that you're not actually product while performing being product convincingly enough to survive? The acceptance isn't embracing commodification, but acknowledging it as condition you must navigate. You sell yourself because system requires it, not because you are product. The selling is what you do, not what you are. But the distinction is subtle and easily lost. Tonight you can stop being product, stop marketing yourself, stop optimizing your brand, stop assessing your market value. For these hours you're not commodity, you're just organism needing rest. The respite is brief, but it's real. Tomorrow's self-commodification can wait. Tonight, you're just being, not being sold. The performance economy. Selling yourself to survive. You're not just working, you're performing work. Not just employed, you're performing employability. Not just productive, you're performing productivity. The economy demands not just your labor, but your enthusiastic performance of being laborer, and the performance is exhausting because you can never break character. The person at work isn't just doing tasks. They're performing dedication, engagement, team spirit. They're not just present, they're performing presence. They smile at appropriate times, nod during meetings, respond to emails with professional warmth. None of this is the work itself. It's performance that work requires. The performance extends beyond work hours. You're performing career ambition on LinkedIn, performing work-life balance on Instagram, performing professional development on resume, performing growth mindset in every interaction. You're always on stage, always selling the performance of being valuable employee. The Zoom era intensified this. Now you perform work while simultaneously performing having good home office setup, performing being put together despite pandemic, performing unbothered professionalism while world burns. The camera makes the performance explicit. You're literally staging yourself for viewing. The person adjusting camera angle, curating background, managing lighting isn't being shallow. They're doing emotional and aesthetic labor that's now required. The performance has production values. You're not just worker, but also set designer for your own workplace performance. The performance of productivity is particularly exhausting. You must appear busy even when there's no work. Must perform having too much to do even when you're waiting for others. Must perform being overwhelmed because appearing to have capacity means getting assigned more work without more pay. The person who efficiently completes work in 3 hours must perform working for 8 hours because admitting efficiency triggers either more work or questioning of whether job is necessary. The performance isn't optional. It's survival strategy and system that measures time, not output. Email becomes performance medium. The enthusiastic sign-off, the professional but warm tone, the strategic response timing. Not too fast, looks desperate. Not too slow, looks uncommitted. Every message is miniature performance of being good employee. The exclamation points in work emails are performance punctuation. You're not actually excited about meeting to discuss quarterly objectives, but you perform excitement because flat effect reads as disengagement, and disengagement threatens employment. The enthusiasm is compulsory. The person who stops performing enthusiasm gets labeled problem employee, not because they're doing bad work, but because they're failing to perform enjoying the work. The emotional labor of performing positive affect is as required as the actual labor, sometimes more so. The performance of work often supersedes actual work. The person who does excellent work silently gets less recognition than person who does mediocre work loudly. Visibility matters more than quality. Performance of work matters more than work itself. The meeting is pure performance. Most could be emails. The actual content matters less than the performance of engagement, asking questions, offering input, appearing thoughtful. You're not there to work but to perform, being team player, being engaged, being valuable enough to keep. The stand-up meeting, the check-in, the one-on-one. These are performance reviews disguised as communication. You're demonstrating that you're working, you're committed, you're worth keeping. The information exchange is secondary to the performance evaluation. The person experiencing anxiety about these meetings isn't being irrational. They're responding accurately to the high stakes of constant performance evaluation. Every interaction is potential failure point. Every conversation is job security risk. The anxiety is appropriate to the actual precarity. The hustle culture intensifies performance demands. Now you must perform having side hustle, performing passion project, performing monetizing your hobbies. Rest is performing self-care. Vacation is performing achieving work-life balance. Every aspect of life becomes performance of being optimal human capital. The personal brand is the ultimate performance. You're creating character called professional you, and performing that character consistently across all platforms. Professional you has curated interests, appropriate opinions, optimized affect. You inhabit this character so constantly you might forget its performance. But it is performance. The real you is messier, more contradictory, less professional, more human. But real you isn't marketable, so real you must be suppressed in favor of performed you who's optimized for career success. Different industries require different performances. Finance performs aggression and confidence. Tech performs passion and innovation. Academia performs intellectual sophistication. Nonprofit performs altruism and mission alignment. But all require performance. You can't just do the work, you must perform being the type of person who does this work. The person trying to be authentic at work discovers authenticity isn't valued unless it performs as authenticity. You can be yourself only if yourself happens to align with what the role requires. Otherwise, you perform being someone the role requires and call that authenticity. The performance creates exhaustion separate from work itself. You might not mind the actual tasks, but the constant performance of being ideal worker is depleting. You're not just working, you're acting the role of worker, and acting all day every day is exhausting. The emotional labor of performance falls disproportionately. Women must perform more warmth, more accommodation, more emotional availability. People of color must perform more competence to overcome bias. LGBTQ people must perform either straight-passing normality or palatable queerness. Disabled people must perform independence and capability. The marginalized do more performance labor for less recognition. The performance never ends because the evaluation never ends. You're always potentially being observed, judged, assessed. The camera might be off, but the surveillance continues. Your output is tracked. Your communication is monitored. Your performance is constant because the watching is constant. Can you perform endlessly? Can you maintain the character without losing yourself in it? Can you remember you're performing while performing convincingly enough to keep job? The recognition of performance as performance provides small distance. You're acting. The professional you is character you play. The separation between actor and role isn't complete, but acknowledging performance as performance prevents total identification with performed self. Tonight, you can drop the performance. Stop performing productivity. Stop performing professional. Stop performing optimized. Stop performing any version of yourself except tired person who needs rest. The performance resumes tomorrow. Tonight, you're off stage. Economic anxiety, dread without object or with too many. You're anxious, not about anything specific, not upcoming meeting, not particular problem, not concrete threat, just anxious, free-floating economic dread that colors everything without being about anything in particular. This is economic anxiety, the ambient fear that's rational response to precarious existence under capitalism. The anxiety has no object because the threats are everywhere and nowhere. You could lose your job, companies downsize without warning. You could get sick, medical bills destroy finances. You could be one accident, one economic downturn, one algorithm change away from catastrophe. The threats are real but diffuse, constant but unpredictable. This is existential dread but economically grounded. You're anxious about nothingness, the nothing of financial ruin, the nothing of being unable to afford existence, the nothing of economic irrelevance. The dread has substance because the threats are real, but it's objectless because you can't pinpoint what to be afraid of or when. The person who's financially stable still feels economic anxiety because stability is temporary, contingent, revocable. The job you have could disappear. The savings you accumulated could evaporate in medical crisis. The market that values you could change. Nothing is secure, and knowing this creates constant low-level dread. The paycheck-to-paycheck person feels acute economic anxiety. One missed check means catastrophe. One unexpected expense means crisis. The margin is zero, which means the anxiety is constant. Every day is threat. Every bill is potential disaster. Every car noise is financial ruin. Different people have different economic anxiety levels, but almost everyone has some. The billionaire worries about maintaining wealth. The professional worries about career trajectory. The working poor worries about survival. The anxiety scales with resources but rarely disappears because capitalism creates systematic insecurity. The gig worker experiences pure economic anxiety. No guaranteed income, no predictable schedule, no benefits, no security. Every day requires hustling for work that might not come. The anxiety isn't irrational, it's accurate assessment of actual precarity. The person watching bank account knows exactly how many days they can survive without income. 3 weeks, 1 month, 3 months if they're lucky. This knowledge creates constant anxiety. You're always X days away from catastrophe, and X is never large enough to feel safe. The economic anxiety intensifies with age. Young person thinks they have time to recover from setbacks. Older person knows time is limited. Recovery is harder. Ageism is real. The anxiety compounds with awareness of decreasing options and increasing vulnerability. The person caring for dependents, children, aging parents, disabled family, experiences multiplied anxiety. Not just their own survival, but others depends on economic stability they can't guarantee. The pressure is crushing, and the anxiety is rational response to actual responsibility without adequate resources. The medical system creates specific economic anxiety. You know that getting sick could bankrupt you, that treatment you need might not be covered, that hospital visit could mean choosing between health and financial survival. The anxiety is warranted. Medical debt is leading cause of bankruptcy. The person avoiding doctor because they can't afford visit is making rational calculation within irrational system. The anxiety about health costs might be killing you slower than untreated condition would, but it's still rational response to economic reality that healthcare is commodity you might not afford. The student debt creates lifetime economic anxiety. You're paying for education that was supposed to provide security, but the debt undermines security you were seeking. The monthly payment is permanent weight, and the anxiety is knowing you'll be paying this for decades, maybe forever, if income-based repayment never covers principal. The housing market creates geographic economic anxiety. You can't afford to live where jobs are. You can't afford housing on income from local jobs. You're trapped between unaffordable housing and inadequate wages, and the anxiety is knowing there's no good option, just choices among bad ones. The person priced out of their own city experiences specific dread. Everything they knew, everyone they're connected to, the community they belong to, all becoming economically inaccessible. The displacement is economic violence, and the anxiety is warranted response to being forced out. The retirement anxiety is knowing you won't be able to retire. Social security won't be enough. Savings are inadequate. You'll work until you can't, then depend on insufficient support systems. The anxiety is looking at old age and seeing poverty, dependence, vulnerability. The person in their 20s told to save for retirement while earning barely enough to survive experiences absurdist anxiety. Save for retirement? Which retirement? The one you'll never afford? The future that seems impossible? The advice is well-intentioned but disconnected from economic reality. The economic anxiety is compounded by gaslighting. You're told you're anxious because you're not budgeting right, not making smart choices, not working hard enough. The anxiety is treated as personal failing rather than rational response to systematic insecurity. The financial advice industry profits from economic anxiety while intensifying it. They sell solutions to problems they help create. Budget better, invest smarter, build emergency fund, as if the problem is your financial literacy, rather than wages being insufficient for existence. The person following all the financial advice, budgeting, saving, investing, still feels economic anxiety because the advice can't overcome structural problems. You can optimize personal finances, but you can't individual solution your way out of systematic wage suppression and wealth concentration. The economic anxiety affects relationships. You can't commit to partnership when financial stability is illusion. Can't have children when you can barely afford yourself. Can't leave bad relationship when you need their income. Economic precarity corrupts everything it touches. The person staying in job they hate, relationship they're unhappy in, city they want to leave. Often they're trapped by economic anxiety. The fear of losing what little security they have prevents pursuing what they want. The anxiety becomes cage. Different anxieties interweave. Health anxiety becomes economic anxiety when treatment costs money. Social anxiety becomes economic anxiety when networking might lead to jobs. Existential anxiety becomes economic anxiety when meaning and purpose are luxuries you can't afford. Can you live with constant economic anxiety? Can you function knowing you're perpetually one crisis away from catastrophe? Can you make plans, pursue dreams, build life when foundation is perpetually unstable? The acceptance isn't eliminating anxiety. That's impossible given actual precarity. The acceptance is acknowledging that anxiety is rational, that fear is appropriate response to real threats, that the dread you feel is honest assessment of economic reality rather than personal neurosis. Tonight, the economic anxiety might quiet slightly. You're not checking account, not calculating survival time, not catastrophizing about future crises. The anxiety will return tomorrow. It always does when you exist in systematically insecure system. But tonight, brief respite from constant dread. The bills can wait. The scarcity can wait. Tonight, you rest from economic anxiety that tomorrow will resume. The meritocracy, myth, bad faith about deservingness. You're told that success comes from hard work, talent, and good choices, that anyone can make it if they try hard enough, that your economic position reflects your merit, your effort, your deservingness. This is the meritocracy myth, and it's bad faith, a lie that serves power by making inequality seem just. The myth serves specific function. It makes winners feel they earn success, and losers feel they deserve failure. The rich are rich because they're smart and hardworking. The poor are poor because they're lazy and make bad choices. The system is fair and outcomes reflect merit. This is demonstrable fiction. Success correlates with parental wealth more than any other factor. Where you're born, who you're born to, what zip code you grow up in. These predict outcomes better than intelligence, effort, or talent. Meritocracy is mythology disguising hereditary class system. But you're encouraged to believe the myth, encouraged to think you control outcomes through your choices, encouraged to credit success to your merit and blame failure on your shortcomings. This is bad faith, denying the facticity of class, the constraints of birth circumstances, the massive role of luck. The person born wealthy has every advantage: better schools, better health care, better connections, better opportunities, safety net for failure. These aren't earned, they're inherited, but they're presented as natural as result of family's merit, as fair distribution of advantages. The person born poor faces every disadvantage: worse schools, worse health care, no connections, limited opportunities, no safety net. These aren't deserved. They're accidents of birth, but they're presented as result of families' failures, as fair consequences of inadequate merit. The myth claims equal opportunity exists. Anyone can succeed, but opportunity is distributed by zip code, by race, by class. The starting line isn't the same for everyone, but we pretend the race is fair and the fastest runners won through merit alone. The person working 3 jobs to survive is working harder than CEO working 1, but CEO makes 100 times more. The meritocracy myth requires believing CEO's cognitive labor is 100 times more valuable than workers' physical labor. This is ideology, not assessment of actual value produced. The college admissions scandal revealed what should have been obvious. Wealthy parents buy their children's success. Legacy admissions, large donations, private tutors, SAT prep courses. The competition isn't meritocratic. It's rigged from start, and then winners claim they succeeded through merit. But this is just explicit version of implicit purchasing that always happens. The wealthy child gets every advantage money can buy, then competes against poor child who had none of those advantages. And when wealthy child wins, we call it meritocracy. The person attending elite university didn't just earn admission through merit. They had resources for test prep, application coaching, extracurriculars. They had family education about how applications work. They had safety to take risks. The merit is inseparable from class advantages. The myth requires ignoring luck's massive role. Right place, right time, meeting right person, catching break, avoiding catastrophe. Luck affects outcomes enormously, but acknowledging this undermines meritocracy myth. So luck is downplayed or reframed as hard work creating opportunities. The successful person tells story of their rise. I worked hard and made smart choices. This erases the luck, the privilege, the advantages they don't see because they're invisible to beneficiaries. The narrative is bad faith, claiming individual merit while denying structural advantage. The failed person internalizes opposite story. I didn't work hard enough, didn't make smart choices. This accepts blame for systematic failures, for structural barriers, for bad luck. The internalization is also bad faith, accepting personal responsibility for systematic problems. The meritocracy myth creates what's called just world fallacy, belief that world is fair, that people get what they deserve. This is psychologically comforting, but factually false. World isn't fair. People don't get what they deserve. Outcomes don't reflect merit. But admitting this is uncomfortable. If success isn't earned, what gives anyone right to resources they have? If failure isn't deserved, what justifies suffering of those without resources? The myth makes inequality comfortable by framing it as fair. The person defending meritocracy is often defending their own position. Admitting systematic unfairness means admitting their success isn't purely earned, their advantages aren't purely deserved. Easier to believe myth than confront uncomfortable truth about unearned advantages. The myth also serves political function. It discourages collective action. If success is individual merit, then failure is individual failing. You should work harder, not organize with others. Should improve yourself, not change system. The myth atomizes resistance. Different people resist myth differently. Some recognize structural barriers clearly. Some oscillate between blaming self and blaming system. Some remain convinced of meritocracy despite experiencing its falseness personally. The person of color experiences meritocracy myth particularly cruelly. They work twice as hard for half the recognition. Face barriers white peers don't face. Must be twice as qualified for same opportunities. Yet when they fail to succeed, it's framed as their inadequate merit, not systematic racism. The woman faces similar myth-reality gap. Wage gap is explained as women's choices, not discrimination. Glass ceiling is explained as women's lack of ambition, not systematic barriers. The myth denies systematic sexism by framing all outcomes as individual merit. The disabled person faces meritocracy myth that defines merit as able-bodiedness. If you can't work full-time at physical labor, you lack merit. If you need accommodations, you're less deserving. The myth excludes disability from legitimate participation. The recognition of meritocracy as myth is liberating and crushing simultaneously. Liberating, your failure isn't purely your fault. Systematic barriers are real. You're not inadequate. The system is rigged. Crushing, hard work doesn't guarantee success. Merit doesn't ensure reward. The game is unfair. Can you live knowing meritocracy is myth? Can you work hard despite knowing hard work doesn't guarantee reward? Can you make smart choices while acknowledging smart choices don't determine outcomes? The acceptance is holding both truths. Your choices matter. You have some agency. And your choices aren't decisive. Systematic factors matter more. You're responsible for your actions, but not responsible for systematic barriers you face. The both and is uncomfortable but honest. Tonight you can rest from performing merit, from proving deservingness, from justifying your existence through productivity. The meritocracy myth says your worth equals your economic value, but tonight you can recognize this as lie. Your worth is inherent, not earned. You deserve rest, not because you worked hard enough to earn it, but because you're human and humans need rest. Tomorrow, you'll return to a system that demands constant proof of merit. But tonight, you can acknowledge the game is rigged, the myth is false, and your economic position doesn't reflect your cosmic worth. The recognition doesn't change the system, but it changes your relationship to it. You're playing rigged game while knowing it's rigged, and somehow that's more honest than believing it's fair. Alienated labor, separated from yourself. Marx identified alienation as fundamental condition of wage labor under capitalism. You're separated from the product of your labor, from the labor process itself, from your species being, and from other workers. This alienation is structure, not feeling, though it certainly creates feelings, particularly feelings of meaninglessness, disconnection, and existing for others' purposes. You produce things you don't own. Your labor creates value that someone else captures. You work 8 hours creating product or service, and you get small fraction of value you created. The rest goes to owners, shareholders, executives. You're separated from what you make. The person assembling product they can't afford to buy experiences this alienation directly. They create the thing with their hands, with their labor, with their time. But the thing belongs to someone else. They're separated from their own creation by property relations they didn't choose. Even knowledge work experiences this. You write code, it belongs to company. You create design, company owns it. You develop idea, it's company IP. Your mental labor, your creativity, your problem solving, all of it becomes property of someone else the moment you produce it. The separation means you can't determine what you produce or how. You don't decide what product to make, what features to include, what markets to serve. These decisions are made by owners, by executives, by those who own means of production. You're just instrument of their will. The person who sees their work used in ways they disagree with experiences alienation acutely. They create thing for one purpose, see it used for another. They build tool, watch it weaponized. They develop service, observe it exploited. They're separated from control over what they create. You're also alienated from labor process itself. Work is designed for efficiency, not for your flourishing. The process is organized to maximize productivity, not to be meaningful or fulfilling. Your preferences about how to work are irrelevant unless they increase output. The person micromanaged, monitored, surveilled experiences alienation from process. They can't determine their own methods, can't work at their own pace, can't organize tasks according to their judgment. The process is controlled by others, and they're just executing others' vision of how work should be done. The automation and de-skilling intensifies this alienation. Tasks are broken into simplest possible components so that workers are replaceable, interchangeable, disposable. You don't craft anything. You perform fragment of process that's been designed to require minimal skill and judgment. The person doing repetitive task feels alienation in their body. Same motion thousands of times, same few seconds of larger process they never see completed. They're reduced to mechanical function, to body part performing motion. Their humanity is obstacle to efficiency. You're alienated from your species being, from human capacity for creative, conscious, self-directed labor. Humans can envision what they'll create before creating it, can work cooperatively, can find meaning in labor. But wage labor reduces you to instrument, to means to someone else's ends. The person who can't find meaning in work experiences this alienation. The work feels pointless, not because it produces nothing useful, but because the purpose serves others' enrichment, not human flourishing. You're making someone else rich, and this is supposed to give your labor meaning. You're alienated from other workers, your competitors for jobs, for raises, for survival. The system pits workers against each other, compete for positions, undercut each other's wages, view each other as threats. The solidarity that could challenge system is undermined by competition system requires. The person watching coworker get fired feels alienation from humanity, should feel solidarity. They're both workers vulnerable to same forces, but also feels relief, at least it wasn't me. The competition for survival alienates workers from each other, prevents collective recognition of shared condition. The alienation creates specific psychological states, meaninglessness. Work doesn't connect to anything larger. Powerlessness. You can't affect conditions of your labor. Normlessness. The rules seem arbitrary and unjust. Isolation. You're alone despite working among others. Self-estrangement. You're disconnected from your own activity. Different work creates different alienation intensities. The assembly line worker experiences alienation obviously. They're cog in machine performing fragment of process, producing object they'll never own. The professional experiences it more subtly. They have more autonomy, but still produce for others' profit. But both are alienated because both sell their labor. Both produce value they don't capture. Both work within structures designed to extract maximum value from their activity. The degree differs, but the structure is identical, your instrument of capital accumulation rather than creator working for own purposes. The person seeking meaningful work often seeks less alienated labor. They want to create something whole, something theirs, something that serves purpose they believe in. But under capitalism, even meaningful work is structured around value extraction. The teacher enriches students, but also produces disciplined workers. The doctor heals patients, but also generates hospital revenue. The technology sector promised less alienated labor, create cool things, change the world, work in innovative ways. But tech workers are just as alienated as traditional workers. They produce software they don't own, enriching shareholders they'll never meet, under surveillance that's more sophisticated than traditional factory. The open source movement represents attempt to overcome alienation through different property relations, create things collectively, share them freely, work for use value rather than exchange value. But most programmers must still do wage labor to survive, doing open source only in spare time after alienated workday. Can you work without alienation under capitalism? Can you produce without being separated from what you produce? Can you labor without laboring for others' enrichment? The acceptance is recognizing that alienation is structural, not personal. You can't overcome it through attitude adjustment or finding right job. The alienation is in the wage-labor relation itself, in selling yourself, in producing for others' profit, in being instrument rather than author. But recognizing alienation is itself form of resistance. When you know you're alienated, when you see the structure clearly, you're not as easily fooled by rhetoric about meaningful work, about company being family, about finding purpose through productivity. You see through mystifications. Tonight, you rest from alienated labor. For these hours, you're not producing value for someone else, not being instrument of others' enrichment, not separated from your own activity. Sleep is one of few remaining activities that hasn't been fully commodified, yet. Tonight, you're just being, not being used. Tomorrow's alienation can wait. Time theft. Your life measured in someone else's profit. Your time is your life. Every hour you spend is hour of your finite existence consumed, never to return. But under capitalism, your time isn't yours. It's commodity to be bought, sold, extracted. The 8 hours daily, the 40 years of career, the majority of your waking life. All of it sold to enrich others. This is time theft, and it's legal, normalized, required. You trade time for money because you must, not because you want to spend 8 hours daily enriching shareholders, but because refusing means starvation. The exchange seems voluntary. You agree to it, but agreement under duress isn't really agreement. You choose to sell your time the way someone chooses wallet over bullet. The person calculating their hourly wage is calculating the price of their life. Each hour costs this much. Each day costs this much. The wage isn't just money. It's conversion rate between your finite existence and someone else's profit. You're selling your life by the hour, and the rate is set by market that doesn't value human life. The 8-hour workday was victory of labor organizing, reduction from even longer hours. But 8 hours is still half your waking life every day for decades, plus commute, plus preparation, plus recovery from exhaustion. The workday colonizes far more than 8 hours. It structures your entire existence. The person waking at 6 a.m. to commute by 7 a.m., to work by 8 a.m., to work until 5 p.m., to commute until 6 p.m., to arrive home at 6:30 p.m., has sold more than 8 hours. They've sold the morning preparation, the commute time, the exhaustion that makes evening barely functional. They've sold most of their day. The time theft is particularly cruel because time is the one thing you can't get more of. Money can be earned later, possessions can be replaced, but time spent working for someone else's profit is gone forever. You'll never get those hours back. Your life has been converted into someone else's capital accumulation. The person nearing retirement calculates the time sold. 40 years, 80,000 hours, More than 9 full years of continuous time, assuming you never slept. 9 years of your one life spent enriching others. The calculation is devastating because it's accurate. This is what capitalism required, most of your life. The time is money equation reveals capitalism's perversity. Time isn't money, time is life, but capitalism treats them as equivalent, as if spending hour of your irreplaceable existence is same as spending dollar. The equation commodifies your life itself, treats your finite existence as just another exchangeable resource. The person told to make the most of your time faces contradiction. Make most of time by selling it. Optimize life by converting it to wages. The advice makes sense within capitalist logic, but it's absurd from perspective of human flourishing. You're told to value time by selling it to those who don't value you. The productivity culture intensifies time theft. Now you must optimize every moment, extract maximum value from every hour. Not just at work, your entire life must be productive. Rest is recharging for more work. Hobbies are skill development for career. Relationships are networking for advancement. Every moment is colonized by productive imperative. The person tracking their productivity, measuring their output, quantifying their value, is participating in their own time theft. They're internalizing the boss, self-imposing the surveillance, volunteering for optimization of their exploitation. The theft becomes self-theft, which is ultimate form of alienation. The lunch break is revealing. It's called break, but it's really minimum pause required for biological functioning. You eat quickly so you can get back to work. The break is just pause in time theft, brief moment where your time isn't being extracted, and even this is grudged, minimized, often unpaid. The person eating at desk, working through lunch, is working for free. They're donating additional life to employer who already purchased 8 hours. This is normalized, praised even, dedicated, committed, team player. The language conceals that you're giving free time to entity that would fire you instantly if profitable. The overtime is additional time theft with compensation. They buy more of your life at premium rate. You're so depleted you need extra money to recover, creating cycle where you sell more time to afford recovery from selling time. The extra pay doesn't compensate for the life consumed. Nothing could. The salaried worker experiences time theft without overtime pay. They're expected to work as long as needed, nights, weekends, whenever. The salary means they've sold not just hours, but availability, access, their entire temporal existence. They're on call, which means their time is never fully theirs. The person checking work email on vacation is experiencing time theft even during allegedly free time. The vacation is contaminated by work's intrusion. You're never fully off because capitalism has purchased right to access you any time. The boundary between work time and lifetime has dissolved. The smartphone intensifies this. You're reachable always, which means you're working always. The phone is leash, allowing employer to extract small moments of time continuously. Death by 1,000 cuts of time theft. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, until your entire day is colonized. The person retiring at 65, if they're lucky enough to retire at all, receives what's called retirement, freedom to use their own time. But this freedom comes after 40 years of time theft, after you're too old to fully enjoy it, after your health has been depleted by decades of labor. You get your time back when you have least capacity to use it. The calculation is grim. Capitalism takes your prime years, your health, your energy, your strength, and returns your time when you're diminished. The theft isn't just quantitative, hours stolen, but qualitative, best years stolen. You're robbed of your peak existence. The person watching parents retire at 65, observing their exhaustion, their health problems, their limited mobility, sees future. You'll work until you're broken, then receive freedom to be broken in your own time. The reward for lifetime of time theft is permission to rest when resting is all you can do. Different workers experience time theft differently. The professional has some flexibility about when hours are worked. The hourly worker has rigid schedule, but both are selling life for money. Both are converting existence into capital. Both are experiencing fundamental theft of their finite time. The time theft affects everything. You can't be present with family because you're exhausted from work. Can't pursue passions because you're depleted from selling yourself. Can't be fully alive because you're spending life earning right to survive. The theft radiates outward, corrupting all time, not just work hours. The person unable to attend a child's event because of work is experiencing how time theft steals more than work hours. The work takes the event time through its demands. The memory that won't be made, the connection that won't happen. This is stolen from both parent and child. The time theft has generational effects. Can you reclaim your time under capitalism? Can you stop selling your life by the hour? Can you exist without converting existence into wages? For most, the answer is no. The reclamation is fantasy unless you have capital. Without capital, you must sell time. The theft is mandatory, dressed as contract, enforced through threat of destitution. The acceptance is knowing you're being robbed, not being happy about it, but seeing it clearly. Your time is being stolen, legally, systematically, by design. The wage is compensation for theft, not fair exchange. You're forced to sell what you can never replace, your life itself, and this is how capitalism functions. Tonight, your time is yours. For these hours, you're not selling life to employer, not converting existence into someone else's profit. The sleep time is stolen from work's grasp, though capitalism keeps trying to colonize it through sleep optimization, through sleep hygiene that's really about maintaining productive capacity. But tonight, for now, your time is yours. The theft resumes tomorrow. The selling continues at dawn. But these hours, these are yours. Not productive, not optimized, not monetized, just being alive in time that belongs to you. The respite is temporary, but real. Tomorrow's time theft can wait. Tonight, your life is your own. The precarity trap, insecurity as control mechanism. You're insecure, not psychologically insecure, though maybe that too, but economically insecure. Your job isn't guaranteed. Your income isn't stable. Your future isn't certain. This precarity isn't accident or failure of capitalism, it's feature. Your insecurity is control mechanism, and it's working exactly as designed. The precarity keeps you compliant. If you had security, you could refuse unreasonable demands, could push back against exploitation, could organize with other workers, but you don't have security, so you accept the demands, tolerate the exploitation, compete with other workers. Your fear keeps you obedient. The person afraid to speak up about workplace problems is being controlled by precarity. They see the issues, unsafe conditions, unfair treatment, illegal practices, but they can't risk job loss, so they stay silent. The precarity converts them from potential whistleblower into complicit participant. Fear is more effective than force. The at-will employment is precarity as policy. You can be fired any time for any reason with no notice. The formal freedom, you can quit any time, is meaningless because you need the job more than job needs you. The power is entirely one-sided, and precarity ensures it stays that way. The person fired without warning, escorted from building, given no explanation, they're experiencing precarity's function. The sudden termination terrorizes remaining workers. Anyone could be next. Better keep head down, work harder, never complain. The firing of one controls many through fear. The probation period, the performance review, the stack ranking, these are precarity mechanisms. You're constantly being evaluated, constantly vulnerable, constantly aware you could be eliminated. The evaluation isn't really about performance. It's about maintaining fear that keeps you controlled. The contractor, the temp, the gig worker, these are pure precarity. No stability, no benefits, no guarantee of tomorrow's work. Every day is hustle for next gig. Every job could be last. The insecurity is total, which means the control is total. You'll accept anything because refusing means having nothing. The person working multiple gig jobs, juggling schedules, always hunting for next opportunity, they're experiencing how precarity becomes entire life structure. Not just worried about one job, but managing portfolio of insecurities. The precarity multiplies, and with it, the exhaustion and desperation. The automation threat intensifies precarity. Your job could be automated. Your skills could become obsolete. You must constantly upskill, reskill, stay relevant, or face replacement. The threat of technological unemployment keeps you running on treadmill, accepting current exploitation to avoid future elimination. The person learning new skills constantly, taking courses, getting certifications. They're trying to outrun precarity. But the race has no finish line. New technology will arrive, new skills will be required, new threats will emerge. You can never be secure because security would mean you're not adequately controlled by fear. The layoffs are precarity's most direct expression. Entire departments eliminated, offices closed, workers discarded despite years of service. The layoff isn't personal failure, it's demonstration of your disposability. You're not valued, you're tolerated, and tolerance can end any time. The person surviving layoff experiences intensified precarity. They weren't fired, but now they know. Anyone can be fired, anytime, regardless of performance or loyalty. The survivors work harder, longer, more desperately. They've internalized the fear, which was the point. The benefits tied to employment are precarity mechanism. Healthcare through employer means losing job could mean death from untreated illness. The stakes aren't just unemployment, they're survival. This binding of survival to employment is deliberate. It makes you more desperate, more controlled. The person staying in job they hate because they need health insurance is trapped by precarity design. The job is cage and healthcare is lock. They're not free to leave because leaving might mean dying. The freedom to quit is theoretical when quitting could be fatal. The retirement insecurity extends precarity into old age. Social security might not be there. Pension is rare. Savings are inadequate. You can't retire or can barely retire. You'll work longer into sickness, maybe until death. The precarity doesn't end. It pursues you into age. The person in their 60s still working, body breaking down, is experiencing lifetime of precarity culminating in inability to stop working despite desperation to rest. They're trapped by inadequate retirement resources, by system that provided no security across entire working life. The precarity prevents collective action. When everyone is insecure, everyone is competing. You can't organize with coworkers because they're competition for scarce security. You can't strike because you can't afford to lose paycheck. You can't push back because you're replaceable. The precarity atomizes resistance. The person wanting to organize workplace but afraid of being fired is experiencing how precarity undermines solidarity. They know organizing could improve conditions for all workers. but they also know that as individual, they're vulnerable. The collective good is sacrificed to individual survival. Different workers experience different precarity intensities. Professional has more security than service worker. Permanent employee has more security than contractor. But almost everyone has some precarity because almost everyone could lose job, could face crisis, could be eliminated. The illusion of meritocracy makes precarity seem fair. If you're insecure, work harder. If you're worried about job, perform better. If you're vulnerable, make yourself indispensable. The individual solution is offered to systematic problem, and this too is control mechanism. It keeps you focused on personal improvement rather than collective resistance. The person working themselves sick trying to achieve security is discovering that security never arrives. There's always new threat, new vulnerability, new reason to be afraid. The precarity is permanent because its function is control, not efficiency. Secure workers are harder to control. The precarity creates specific psychology, constant vigilance, perpetual anxiety, obsessive compliance. You're always watching for threats, always worried about future, always performing acceptability. This psychology serves capital perfectly. You're self-policing, self-exploiting, doing employers' control work for them. Can you escape precarity under capitalism? Can you achieve security that allows refusing exploitation? For most, no. Precarity is structural feature of system that requires disposable workers, exploitable labor, fearful compliance. Your insecurity is someone's tool of control, and they have no incentive to provide security that would reduce their control. The acceptance is recognizing precarity as mechanism rather than accident. You're not insecure because you failed. You're insecure because system requires your insecurity to function. The precarity is designed, maintained, intensified deliberately. Tonight, you're still precarious, still vulnerable to job loss, economic crisis, systematic elimination. Tomorrow brings no new security, but tonight you can recognize the trap clearly. You're not failing to achieve security. You're trapped in system that denies security to maintain control. The recognition doesn't free you from precarity, but it frees you from blaming yourself for systematic insecurity. Consumption as compensation, buying relief from economic pain. You're suffering from economic captivity, so you consume, buy things, acquire stuff, purchase experiences. The consumption is presented as freedom, as reward, as self-care, but really it's compensation for the pain capitalism inflicts. You're medicating your economic wounds with the very system that wounded you. The weekend shopping is how you recover from work week that depleted you. The purchase provides brief dopamine hit, momentary pleasure, temporary relief from grinding reality of selling yourself. Then the relief fades, the pain returns, and you shop again. The cycle is addiction, and capitalism is dealer. The person buying things they don't need with money they don't have is trying to fill void that capitalism created. The void is alienation, meaninglessness, time stolen, life commodified. But the void can't be filled with commodities because commodities created the void. You're using poison as medicine. The advertising works by creating dissatisfaction, then offering product as solution. You're inadequate. Buy this. You're unattractive. Buy this. You're falling behind. Buy this. The consumption is sold as solution to problems consumption itself creates. The person feeling inadequate after viewing advertisements is experiencing manufactured dissatisfaction designed to drive consumption. They were fine before seeing ad. Now they're convinced they need product they'd never heard of. The dissatisfaction is produced to be temporarily relieved through purchase. The retail therapy isn't therapy, it's self-medication. You're treating economic pain with economic activity, which is like treating alcoholism with more alcohol. Temporarily numbs the pain while making underlying problem worse. The debt accumulates, the clutter grows, but the relief gets briefer each time. The person with closet full of unused purchases is seeing evidence of consumption's failure to satisfy. Each purchase promised to make them happy, complete, enough. Each purchase failed, but instead of recognizing pattern, they try again. Next purchase will be the one. It never is. The subscription economy locks you into perpetual consumption. Monthly fees for services you barely use, automatic renewals you forget to cancel, death by 1,000 small charges that add up to significant ongoing cost. You're not even consuming actively. Consumption has become passive, automatic, inescapable. The person discovering they're paying for 5 streaming services, 3 software subscriptions, 2 gym memberships, and 6 other monthly charges is experiencing how consumption colonizes your finances automatically. Each charge is small. Together, they're significant. Canceling requires effort, so they continue paying for consumption they don't want. The experience economy pivots from things to experiences, but doesn't solve problem. Now you're buying Instagram-worthy experiences instead of Instagram-worthy products. The emptiness remains because emptiness isn't from consuming wrong things. It's from consuming as substitute for living. The person traveling to find themselves is seeking meaning through consumption of experiences. Travel industry sells transformation, enlightenment, authentic living, all available for purchase. But you can't buy your way out of alienation. The self you're seeking isn't in Bali or Paris or Thailand. It's in the life capitalism prevents you from living. The self-care industry commodifies the care you need from system that's hurting you. Stressed from overwork, buy stress relief products, anxious from precarity, purchase anxiety reduction services. The care is real need, but meeting need through consumption keeps you trapped in system creating the need. The person buying self-care products, taking self-care workshops, practicing self-care routines is trying to heal from capitalism using capitalism. The bath bomb doesn't address systematic overwork. The meditation app doesn't solve precarity. The comfort is real but temporary, and it requires ongoing consumption. The minimalism movement recognizes consumption's failure, but often becomes its own consumption category. Buy books about minimalism. Purchase minimalist furniture. Consume minimalism as aesthetic. The irony is thick, consuming your way out of consumption. The person pursuing minimalist lifestyle but spending thousands on minimalist products hasn't escaped consumption. They've just changed consumption's style. The underlying pattern remains, solving problems through purchasing, seeking meaning through having. The debt accumulation is consumption's natural result. You're consuming beyond your means because your means are insufficient for living, and consumption provides brief relief from insufficiency. The credit card enables consumption now, payment later. Later comes, bringing financial pressure that drives more consumption. The person drowning in debt from years of consumption is experiencing end stage of using purchasing as pain relief. The debt compounds, the minimum payments grow, the financial stress intensifies. The very consumption that was supposed to relieve pain now creates it. But stopping consumption means facing pain directly, which seems impossible. Different forms of consumption target different pains. Luxury goods compensate for feeling small by signaling status. Fast fashion compensates for feeling inadequate by providing constant novelty. Technology consumption compensates for feeling behind by providing latest model. All of it is pain relief through purchasing. The person tracking their spending, discovering they spent thousands on categories they don't even remember, is seeing how consumption operates almost unconsciously. It's not deliberate acquisition, it's automatic response to economic pain. Buy to feel better, feel bad again, buy again. The cycle is unconscious. The minimalist lifestyle promised as alternative is often inaccessible to those who need it most. Poor people can't afford minimalism. They need stuff because they can't purchase services. The working class person needs car they repair themselves, not car service. Needs cooking equipment, not meal delivery. Minimalism is luxury. The sustainable consumption is capitalism adapting to critiques of consumption. Buy eco-friendly, purchase ethical, consume consciously. The solution to consumption problem is better consumption, which keeps you consuming while feeling good about it. The person buying sustainable products at premium prices is consuming their way toward good conscience about consumption. The products might be better, but the structure remains, addressing systematic problems through individual purchasing decisions. The consumption continues, just with green branding. Can you stop consuming as compensation? Can you address economic pain directly rather than medicating it with purchasing? The difficulty is that consumption is often genuinely pleasurable. The purchase does provide relief, however brief. The possession does create happiness, however temporary. This isn't illusion, it's real. But it's also trap. The acceptance is recognizing consumption as compensation without judging yourself for needing compensation. You're in pain from economic captivity. You're seeking relief. Consumption provides some. This is rational response to painful situation, not moral failing. But recognizing it as compensation rather than solution changes the relationship. You're not consuming your way to freedom. You're self-medicating to survive unfree condition. The consumption isn't path forward, it's temporary relief from being trapped. Tonight, you're not consuming, not purchasing, not acquiring, not filling void with stuff. The void remains, but you're facing it directly rather than covering it with commodities. The pain of economic captivity is present, but you're feeling it honestly rather than numbing it with consumption. Tomorrow you might shop again, probably will, but tonight you're just being without buying. The retirement lie, working until you die. You're told to work hard now so you can retire later. Save money, invest wisely, prepare for golden years. The retirement is promised as reward for lifetime of labor, as freedom waiting at end of working life. But for most people, retirement is lie. You'll work until you can't, and then you'll survive on inadequate resources until you die. The traditional retirement, stop working at 65, live comfortably on pension and Social Security, was brief historical anomaly, and it's ending. The pension is extinct for most workers. Social Security is insufficient for living. The retirement age keeps rising. The golden years are tarnishing before they arrive. The person in their 20s being told to save for retirement is being sold impossible dream. Save 15% of income that barely covers current expenses for 40 years, while also paying student debt, rent, healthcare, survival costs. The math doesn't work. You can't save adequately when wages don't cover living. The retirement calculator is exercise in magical thinking. Enter your desired retirement age, desired retirement income. Discover you need to save $1 million, $2 million, more. Now calculate how much you'd need to save monthly to reach that goal. The number is more than your rent. The calculator reveals impossibility dressed as personal finance planning. The person watching retirement calculator spit out save $3,000 monthly, when their take-home pay is $3,500, is experiencing how retirement planning assumes resources most people don't have. The advice is useless. The goal is impossible, but you're told the failure to achieve it is your fault. The 401k replaced pensions, shifting risk from employer to employee. Now your retirement depends on stock market you don't control, investment choices you're not qualified to make, employer matching that might not exist. The security of pension is replaced by precarity of market-dependent account. The person watching retirement account drop 30% during recession is experiencing how 401k transfers risk to workers. The market crashes, your retirement disappears. You made conservative choices, still lost money. You did everything right, still failed. The system is rigged, and your retirement is gambling stake. The work until you're 70 is becoming normalized. The retirement age inches upward as people live longer but don't earn enough to retire earlier. You'll work into old age not because you want to, but because you must. The choice is working or poverty, and poverty at 70 is particularly grim. The person watching parents work into their 70s, bodies breaking down, health deteriorating, is seeing their own future. Work until you're broken. Then maybe retire if you've saved enough. Probably haven't saved enough. Probably will work until you literally can't. This is what retirement looks like for most people. The gig economy eliminates even the possibility of retirement. No employer contributions. No social security credits in some cases. No retirement planning tools. Just perpetual hustle until you're too old to hustle then. What? The gig economy is retirementless economy, and it's growing. The person freelancing, contracting, gigging has no retirement plan because there's no structure to plan within. Each year is surviving that year. The future is abstract threat that you'll deal with later. Except later arrives, and you haven't prepared because you couldn't prepare, because the system provided no way to prepare. The healthcare tie to employment means losing job in later years could mean death before retirement. You need employer insurance until Medicare at 65. Losing job at 62 means 3 years without healthcare or prohibitively expensive COBRA. The gap could kill you before retirement arrives. The person considering early retirement but paralyzed by healthcare fears is trapped by American healthcare system. They could afford to stop working, but they can't afford to lose health insurance. The retirement they could take is prevented by health coverage tied to employment. The phased retirement is emerging as compromise, work part-time in later years. But this isn't graceful transition. It's acknowledgement that you can't afford to stop working completely. You're reducing hours because you're exhausted, but you're continuing to work because you're broke. The person working part-time at 68 because full retirement is financially impossible is experiencing how retirement has become luxury for wealthy. They did the responsible thing, worked hard, saved what they could, made smart choices. But smart choices within exploitative system don't produce comfort. They produce continued work into old age. The Social Security is insufficient for living on, and it's under constant attack. The monthly benefit is below poverty level for many. The retirement age is being pushed upward. The program itself is threatened with cuts, privatization, elimination. You're told to rely on Social Security while being warned it might not exist. The person calculating Social Security benefits discovers they'll receive $1,400 monthly after 40 years of paying in. The rent in their area is $1,800. The calculation reveals that Social Security is supplement, not solution. You can't retire on it. You need additional resources that you probably don't have. The reverse mortgage, the downsizing, the moving to cheaper location, these are strategies for retirement poverty management. You're not planning golden years. You're planning survival strategies for inadequate resources. The retirement isn't freedom. It's a different kind of precarity. The person selling family home to fund retirement is converting memories into money because they have no other option. The place they raised kids, built life, created home, it's being liquidated because retirement planning failed. Not because they failed, because system failed to provide adequate resources for retirement. The working until death is becoming normalized. Death at desk, collapse from still working. The obituaries mention died while still actively working, as if this is admirable rather than tragic. You work until you die because retirement is inaccessible, and we've normalized this as acceptable. The person reading about worker dying on job, having worked into their 80s, should feel horror but might feel envy. At least they had job. At least they avoided homelessness. At least they died quickly instead of prolonged poverty. This is how dystopian the retirement situation has become. Different workers face different retirement impossibilities. Professional might have some savings. Working class person might have nothing. But increasingly, even professionals can't retire comfortably. The retirement crisis is spreading up income ladder because wages haven't kept pace with cost of living or length of retirement. The delayed gratification promised by retirement is cruelest lie capitalism tells. Work hard now, enjoy later. Sacrifice youth for old age. Endure decades of exploitation for promised freedom. Then discover freedom doesn't arrive because you can't afford it, or arrives when you're too old to enjoy it. Can you retire under modern capitalism? Can you stop working and live comfortably? If you're wealthy, yes. If you're professional with high income and started saving early, maybe. If you're working class, probably not. If you're gig worker, absolutely not. The retirement is stratified by class, and most people are in classes that don't retire. The acceptance is recognizing that retirement as sold to you is probably not happening. You might work until you die. You might retire into poverty. You might survive on inadequate resources. This isn't your fault. It's systematic failure to provide for aging workers. Tonight, retirement feels distant, impossible, irrelevant. You're too busy surviving now to worry about hypothetical future. But the future comes regardless, and it's bringing poverty in old age unless something changes. The retirement lie is you can work your way to comfortable old age. The truth is you'll work your way to old age, period, and comfort is for the wealthy. Class consciousness suppressed. Why you can't see the cage. You live in class society but don't see it clearly. The class divisions are real, powerful, determining, but they're hidden behind meritocracy mythology, individualism ideology, consumption distraction. You're kept from recognizing your class position and from organizing with others in same position. This suppression of class consciousness is necessary for capitalism's continuation. The word class itself is taboo. Americans don't talk about class. We talk about middle class, a category so broad it's meaningless, stretching from poverty to wealth. The vagueness is deliberate. If everyone is middle class, there's no working class to organize, no ruling class to oppose, no class conflict to acknowledge. The person describing themselves as middle class while working paycheck to paycheck with no savings and constant financial stress is misidentifying their class position. They're working class. They sell labor to survive. They own no significant capital. They're one crisis from catastrophe. But they've been taught that working class means failure, so they claim middle class instead. The meritocracy myth suppresses class consciousness by claiming class is chosen, not inherited. You're rich because you're smart and hardworking. You're poor because you're lazy and made bad choices. This denies class as systematic structure and recasts it as individual achievement, preventing recognition of class interests. The person believing they'll become rich through hard work is believing myth that prevents class consciousness. They identify with billionaires against their own class interests because they imagine they'll be billionaire someday. The temporary embarrassed millionaire is ideal capitalism citizen, oppressed but identifying with oppressors. The individualism ideology prevents collective class consciousness. Everything is individual. Your success, your failure, your choices, your responsibility. There's no we of working class, just I of individual workers competing. The atomization prevents organization by fragmenting class into isolated individuals. The person thinking I need to work harder to succeed, instead of we need to organize for better wages, is thinking individualistically instead of class consciously. They're focused on individual mobility instead of collective improvement, which is exactly what capitalism requires. Individual solutions to systematic problems prevent collective action. The consumption creates false consciousness. You're worker selling labor, but you're also consumer buying products. The consumer identity is emphasized. The worker identity is suppressed. You identify with what you buy rather than what you do, fragmenting class identity into market segments. The person identifying as Apple person or luxury brand person rather than service worker or teacher has adopted consumer identity over class identity. They feel affinity with others who buy same products rather than others who share class position. The consumption creates cross-class identities that undermine class solidarity. The lifestyle branding creates fictional distinctions within working class. Professional versus blue-collar, creatives versus tradespeople, digital nomads versus traditional workers. These distinctions create hierarchy within working class, preventing unified consciousness and action. The person with college degree looking down on person without degree is experiencing intra-class division that benefits only ruling class. Both are selling labor to survive. Both are workers, but the distinction is maintained, preventing solidarity, ensuring workers compete rather than organize. The small business owner mythology is particularly effective at suppressing class consciousness. You might own small business, but unless you own significant capital and employ many workers, you're petty bourgeoisie at most, closer to working class than to ruling class. But you identify upward with capital against workers, including yourself. The person working 80 hours weekly in small business they own, but barely surviving financially, should recognize their self-exploiting worker, not capitalist, but they identify as business owner, not worker, aligning themselves with capitalism against their own material interests. The middle management creates buffer between workers and ruling class. Managers are workers, they sell labor, but they identify with management, not workers. They enforce discipline on workers while being subject to discipline from above. Their position suppresses their class consciousness while enabling exploitation of other workers. The person enforcing productivity quotas on workers while being monitored themselves for productivity is experiencing contradiction of middle management. Their worker oppressing workers, identifying with capital while being exploited by capital. The position prevents clear class consciousness. The professional managerial class is particularly confused about class position. High income suggests wealth, but they're still selling labor, still one termination from precarity, still subject to capital's power. They're labor aristocracy, well-paid workers, but they think they're capitalists. The person earning $200,000 annually, but with no significant capital, complete dependence on employment, and inability to stop working is working class by position, even if they're wealthy by income. But they don't see themselves as working class, don't identify with workers, don't organize for workers' interests. The education system suppresses class consciousness by not teaching class analysis. You learn American history without learning labor history. You learn economics without learning political economy. You learn individual psychology without learning class structure. The absence of class education is itself class education. The person graduating college without understanding capitalism, class structure, or labor history has been deliberately miseducated. They know how to be a productive worker, but not how to recognize exploitation, organize collectively, or challenge class system. The media suppresses class consciousness by centering individual stories over systematic analysis. The news covers individual success or failure, not class dynamics. The entertainment shows individual heroes, not collective action. The framing is always individual, preventing systematic class consciousness. The person consuming media that shows billionaires as heroes, unions as corrupt, workers as lazy or stupid, is receiving anti-class consciousness propaganda. The media doesn't report news. It shapes consciousness in ways that support ruling class interests. Different groups have different barriers to class consciousness. Workers of color face race-class intersection that complicates organizing. Women face gender-class intersection. Immigrants face legal class intersection. These complications are often used to divide working class, preventing unified consciousness. The racial resentment among white workers prevents class consciousness by directing anger at workers of different races rather than at capital. The white worker blaming immigrant for job loss rather than blaming capitalist who eliminated job is experiencing successful division of working class along racial lines. Can you develop class consciousness under capitalism? Can you see class structure clearly despite ideological suppression? Yes, but with difficulty. Class consciousness requires education that system doesn't provide, collective experience that individualism prevents, and political courage that precarity discourages. But it's possible, and it's essential for any meaningful resistance to exploitation. The acceptance is recognizing that your lack of class consciousness isn't personal failing. It's result of systematic suppression. You've been taught not to see class, not to think in class terms, not to organize on class basis. The teaching is sophisticated, pervasive, effective. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize yourself as working class, as selling labor to survive, as subject to capital's power, as sharing interests with other workers, the class position becomes clear. The consciousness, once developed, is liberating even though the condition remains oppressive. Tonight, you might think about class position clearly, not individual success or failure, but structural position within capitalism. You sell labor, you're subject to capital. You share this with billions. The recognition doesn't free you from class position, but it clarifies who's really in cage with you and who put you there. The impossibility of escape, individual solutions to systematic problems. You want out of wage labor, out of economic captivity, out of selling yourself. You've seen the cage, felt its constraints, and you want escape. So you pursue individual solutions, financial independence, passive income, entrepreneurship, geographic arbitrage. But individual escape from systematic captivity is largely impossible, and the attempt itself is exhausting. The FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, promises escape through extreme frugality and investment. Save 70% of income, invest in index funds, retire at 35 or 40, live free from wage labor through passive income. The promise is appealing. Who wouldn't want to escape the cage? The person pursuing FIRE discovers several problems. First, saving 70% requires income most people don't have. Second, the extreme frugality is its own cage. You're working insanely hard and living miserably to escape work. Third, the passive income usually requires significant capital accumulation, which requires time, luck, and privilege. The FIRE success stories are mostly high earners who could save aggressively. The tech worker making $150,000 can save $100,000 annually. The teacher making $40,000 cannot. The warehouse worker making $30,000 definitely cannot. FIRE is escape for those with resources to escape. Others need not apply. The person trying to FIRE on median income discovers it's impossible without severe deprivation or side hustles that are themselves wage labor. The escape plan requires working more, living worse, existing in constant calculation mode. Is this freedom or different cage? The passive income fantasy promises money without work. But passive income usually requires either significant capital, rental properties, dividend stocks, or significant labor up front, creating products, building businesses. There's nothing passive about it until you're already wealthy. The person trying to create passive income through online course, book, affiliate marketing discovers the passive part requires constant work. Marketing, updating, maintaining, competing. The income might be somewhat passive once established, but establishing it requires intense labor, and most attempts fail, producing no income at all. The entrepreneurship is sold as escape from wage labor. Be your own boss. Control your time. Build something. But most entrepreneurs work more hours for less pay than employees, have less security, and fail more often than they succeed. You've escaped wage labor cage into entrepreneurship cage. The person who quit job to start business discovers they've traded one boss for many. Every client is boss, every customer is boss, the market is boss. They work 80 hours weekly instead of 40, make less money, have no benefits. The freedom is mostly illusion. The location independence is sold as escape. Work remotely from beach. Live in cheap country. Arbitrage costs. But geographic arbitrage just means extracting first world wages while living in third world, which is its own form of exploitation. And you're still working, still captive to wage labor, just in different location. The person working remotely from Thailand, living cheaply while earning American wages, hasn't escaped capitalism. They've globalized their participation in it. They're still selling labor, still subject to employers' demands, still economically captive. The beach is prettier, but the cage remains. The side hustle is sold as path to escape. Monetize your hobby, turn passion into profit, build income streams. But side hustle means working more, commodifying things you loved, and usually producing minimal income while consuming all free time. The person with 3 side hustles on top of full-time job is working themselves to death, not achieving freedom. They've intensified their economic captivity, not escaped it. Every hobby is monetized, every skill is marketed, every moment is productive. This isn't freedom. It's total colonization of life by work. The minimalism is sold as escape from consumption. Need less, earn less, work less. But minimalism often requires money. Smaller home in nice area costs more than larger home in cheap area. Quality minimalist goods cost more than cheap clutter. And minimalism doesn't solve wage labor. It just means you're selling yourself for less. The person pursuing minimalist lifestyle discovers it's expensive to be minimalist. The capsule wardrobe of quality pieces costs more than fast fashion. The tiny house costs as much as regular house. The minimalism is aesthetic choice, not economic liberation. The off-grid living is sold as ultimate escape. Leave society. Be self-sufficient. But off-grid requires significant capital, land, equipment, infrastructure. And most people can't leave. They have families, obligations, no skills for self-sufficiency. Off-grid is escape for privileged few, not solution for masses. The person fantasizing about off-grid cabin is fantasizing about escape they can't afford and couldn't maintain. The reality of off-grid is hard physical labor, isolation, vulnerability. It's not freedom from work. It's different kind of work that most people lack skills and resources to perform. The inheritance, the lottery, the windfall, these are fantasies of escape through luck. You can't plan for them, can't rely on them, can't achieve them through effort. The fantasy is symptom of how impossible escape is through individual effort. You resort to magical thinking about sudden unearned wealth. The person buying lottery tickets is buying brief hope of escape, not actual escape. The odds are astronomical. The money is wasted. But the fantasy is comforting enough that wasting money feels worthwhile. The desperation for escape drives irrational hope. Different escape attempts share common features. They require resources most people don't have. They require skills most people don't possess. They require privileges most people weren't granted. The escape is theoretically possible but practically impossible for vast majority. The successful escapees are exceptions that prove rule. Yes, some people fire, some build passive income, some succeed as entrepreneurs, but the success rate is tiny, the requirements are high, and using exceptions to validate system is propaganda. Most people trying to escape fail and remain captive. The person reading success stories about financial independence, passive income, entrepreneurial freedom needs to understand these are survivorship bias. For every success story, there are hundreds of failures who tried same strategies and failed. The success stories are marketed, the failures are invisible. The individual escape attempts also leave the system intact. Even if you personally escape wage labor, capitalism continues exploiting billions. Your escape doesn't free others. It might even contribute to their oppression if your passive income comes from owning capital that exploits workers. The landlord who achieved financial independence through rental properties has escaped wage labor by becoming labor exploiter. They're free from selling themselves by purchasing others' labor through rent extraction. This isn't escape from capitalism, it's changing sides within capitalism. Can you escape individually? Can you break free from economic captivity through personal strategies? Very rarely, with luck, privilege, resources, and often by exploiting others. The escape is so difficult that attempting it exhausts you while success remains unlikely. The attempt itself is often another form of cage, working harder, living worse, always calculating, never actually free. The acceptance is recognizing that individual escape from systematic captivity is impossible for most, extremely difficult for some, and not real solution even when achieved. The cage is systematic. The liberation must be systematic. Individual escape is fantasy that keeps you trying individual solutions instead of pursuing collective resistance. Tonight, you're still captive. The escape attempts haven't worked, or haven't started, or aren't realistic. The fire is impossible. The passive income is fantasy. The entrepreneurship is too risky. The lottery won't hit. You're stuck in economic captivity, and individual escape probably isn't coming. But recognizing this is itself a form of clarity. You stop wasting energy on impossible individual solutions. Stop blaming yourself for not escaping. Stop fantasizing about getting rich. The acceptance of impossibility of individual escape is painful but realistic. The cage is systematic, and you're in it with billions of others. The way out, if there is a way out, is collective, not individual. The acceptance, living honestly under economic captivity. We arrive at acceptance, not celebration, not embrace, but realistic acknowledgement of condition. You're economically captive. The freedom is mostly illusion. The cage is real. Individual escape is unlikely. This is your situation, and pretending otherwise is exhausting. Accepting it honestly is more restful than maintaining comforting lies. The first acceptance. You're not as free as you're told. The wage labor isn't voluntary in meaningful sense. The consumption isn't freedom. The choices among constraints aren't real choices. You're captive, and the captivity is systematic, not personal. The second acceptance. Your captivity isn't your fault. You didn't create capitalism. You didn't choose to be born into class system. You didn't design economy that requires selling yourself to survive. The structure was here before you, and you're navigating structure you inherited. The third acceptance, working harder won't free you. The meritocracy is myth. The individual solutions mostly fail. The bootstraps rhetoric is propaganda. You can work yourself to death and remain captive because the captivity is structural, not something effort overcomes. The fourth acceptance, you share this captivity with billions. You're not alone in cage. Most humans are economically captive. The shared condition could create solidarity, collective consciousness, unified resistance. Or it could create competition, resentment, isolated suffering. Both are possible. The fifth acceptance, the exhaustion you feel is rational. You're exhausted from performing, from selling yourself, from economic anxiety, from pretending you're free. The exhaustion is appropriate response to exhausting condition. You're not weak. The condition is depleting. The sixth acceptance, consuming won't solve the problem. The relief is temporary. The void remains. The pain returns. Consumption is compensation, not solution. You can stop blaming yourself for consumption while recognizing it as symptom, not cure. The seventh acceptance, retirement probably isn't coming as promised. You'll work longer, retire poorer, or both. The golden years are tarnishing. The acceptance doesn't make this fair, but it makes it less surprising, less personally devastating. The eighth acceptance, the precarity is permanent feature, not temporary bug. The insecurity is control mechanism. The fear is functional. The instability is designed. You can stop hoping for security that system is designed to deny. The ninth acceptance, the system won't reform itself. Capitalism doesn't become ethical through critique. Power doesn't voluntarily relinquish control. The system persists because it serves those who benefit from it, and they won't change it willingly. The 10th acceptance. Living honestly in the cage is better than lying about being free. The acceptance reduces one form of suffering, the suffering of pretending, of maintaining illusions, of believing myths. The cage remains, but you see it clearly. The person accepting economic captivity isn't giving up on change. They're seeing clearly what needs changing. You can't change what you can't see. The acceptance is seeing clearly, naming honestly, understanding accurately. This is prerequisite for meaningful resistance. The acceptance doesn't mean contentment. You can accept reality while opposing reality. can acknowledge cage while seeking exit, can recognize captivity while refusing to make peace with it. Acceptance is clarity, not collaboration. Different people reach acceptance differently. Some through exhaustion, too tired to maintain illusions. Some through analysis, understanding creates acceptance. Some through crisis, when system fails them personally, they see systems' failures generally. But all acceptance involves similar shift, from believing myths to seeing reality, from blaming self to recognizing structure, from seeking individual escape to understanding systematic captivity. The shift is uncomfortable but clarifying. The acceptance creates different relationship to work. You still work, you must, but you work knowing what it is, selling yourself to survive, not pursuing passion, not building career, not finding meaning, just doing what's necessary within coercive system. The honesty removes some of work's psychological burden. The person going to job they don't love while knowing they're selling labor to survive has different consciousness than person going to job while believing in career mythology. They might do same work, but they do it honestly. They're not failing to find meaningful work. They're successfully seeing work as what it is. The acceptance affects consumption too. You still consume. You live in consumption economy. But you consume knowing what it is. Compensation for pain, temporary relief, symptom of alienation. The consumption is same, but the consciousness is different. You're not consuming your way to happiness. You're self-medicating to survive. The acceptance influences relationships with others. You see their captivity too. The competition for scarce resources is orchestrated, not natural. The conflicts between workers serve capital. The solidarity that could resist oppression is prevented by dividing oppressed. Seeing this creates possibility of different relating. The person recognizing co-worker as fellow captive rather than competitor has different basis for relationship. They might still compete. Structure requires it, but they compete while knowing competition serves neither of them. The awareness creates possibility of solidarity despite structural division. The acceptance makes rest possible in way it wasn't before. When you believe you should be free, the unfreedom is personal failing requiring constant effort to overcome. When you accept you're captive in captive system, the unfreedom is just reality. You can rest from trying to individually overcome systematic captivity. Tonight, you accept. You're economically captive. The freedom is limited. The escape is unlikely. The exhaustion is rational. The pretending is over. You see the cage clearly, and the seeing is itself kind of freedom. Not freedom from cage, but freedom from lying about cage. Tomorrow returns you to captivity. The wage labor, the consumption, the performance, the anxiety. But you return with clearer consciousness. You know what you're doing, why you're doing it, what it costs. The honesty doesn't make captivity comfortable, but it makes it more bearable than maintaining illusions while experiencing reality. The final rest. Sleep as brief freedom from capital. We end with sleep. The remaining activity that capital hasn't fully commodified, though it's trying. Sleep is brief freedom from economic captivity, from wage labor, from consumption, from performance. In sleep, you're not selling yourself, not buying things, not optimizing productivity. You're just organism resting, and this is closest thing to freedom you get. Sleep is what Marx called species being human in non-alienated way, not working for someone else, not producing for exchange, not consuming to compensate, just being biologica and necessary and free. Capital hates this remaining space of non-commodification, which is why sleep itself is under attack. The sleep optimization industry wants to commodify even this. Track your sleep. Optimize your sleep. Purchase sleep aids. Even rest must be productive, must be improved, must be consumed. But tonight you can sleep without optimizing, rest without measuring, exist without producing. The person refusing to track sleep, refusing to optimize rest, refusing to treat sleep as productivity enhancement is protecting last space of non-commodified existence. Sleep is biological necessity, not performance metric. Resisting its commodification is small act of resistance against capitalism's total colonization of life. As you prepare for sleep, you can release the economic captivity temporarily. The wage labor pauses, the consumption stops, the performance ends, the economic anxiety quiets. For these hours, you're free from capitalism's demands, even though you remain within capitalism's structure. The body lying down is body that's not being sold. The mind quieting is mind that's not optimizing human capital. The consciousness fading is consciousness that's not maintaining performance. Sleep is biological necessity that becomes political act simply by being non-commodified time. Tomorrow, the captivity resumes. The wage cage opens at dawn. The selling begins again. The performance continues. The exhaustion accumulates. But tonight, you're briefly free. Free not from capitalism, you're still in it, but from capitalism's active demands, you're not performing it. The acceptance you've reached today makes sleep different. You're not resting to be more productive tomorrow. You're resting because you're tired, because you're human, because biological necessity supersedes economic demands. The rest is for you, not for capital. Good night, economically captive being. Tomorrow brings more selling of yourself, more economic anxiety, more performance of freedom that isn't real freedom. But tonight, the selling stops. The anxiety quiets. The performance ends. Tonight, you exist without existing for capital's purposes. The universe doesn't care about capitalism or your captivity within it, doesn't care about your wage labor or your consumption or your economic anxiety. This cosmic indifference is itself comfort. Your economic suffering isn't cosmically significant, which means you don't have to carry it as cosmic burden. Sleep in the knowledge that your economic captivity is structural, not personal. Your exhaustion is rational response to exhausting system. Your inability to escape individually isn't your failing. Your consumption is compensation for systematic pain. Your acceptance of reality is clearer than belief in myths. Your brief freedom in sleep is real, however temporary. Rest now. Tomorrow's wage labor can wait. Tomorrow's economic anxiety will return. Tomorrow's performance resumes. But tonight you're briefly free from capital's demands, existing in non-commodified time, being human rather than being human capital. The economic captivity is a permanent feature of capitalism. You're trapped, and individual escape is mostly impossible. But seeing the cage clearly is better than pretending you're free. Living honestly in captivity is more restful than lying about liberation. Working to survive while knowing it's coercion is clearer than working while believing it's choice. Sleep well, captive being. Your cage is real. Your exhaustion is justified. Your acceptance is honest. Tomorrow brings more selling yourself to survive. Tonight, you rest from the selling. The brief freedom is precious precisely because it's brief. The sleep is resistance precisely because it refuses productivity. Good night. May sleep bring rest from economic captivity. May dreams be free from wage labor's demands. May tomorrow bring continued clarity about the cage, even as you must function within it. But tonight you sleep free from capital's grasp, however temporarily. and temporary freedom is still freedom. Rest in the bleak truth, you're economically captive, escape is unlikely, the system is rigged, and admitting this is more restful than pretending otherwise. Sleep is brief respite from permanent condition. Take it. The captivity resumes at dawn, but dawn can wait. Tonight, you rest.